weeks or is it 2 weeks?
Thank you, Basil. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening. So I think we should maybe have a discussion, all of us here, and then open it up to questions from the audience. And I'm really curious to know what your experiences were like working with Bill Sherwood as actors, as producer, as a casting director. How did this all come together? What was he like?
A little fussy.
Fussy? How was he a fuss budget?
Myriad ways. He was amazing. He knew what he wanted, and he held out for it. He was uncompromising, and yet he could also decide something wasn't working, shift gears, and go in a completely different direction. Mm-hmm. For instance, at least physically, Nick was based on a guy named Nick who was about 6'3", and with dark, spiky hair and really powerful. But Steve came along, and Steve was perfect. Mm-hmm. So he went with Steve. So in other cases, with Michael was Bill in many, many ways. Because
my audition was horrible. I had just graduated with John, actually, from Circle in the Square Theater School here in New York, and had gone to the audition, read the part. I was awful. And some guy in the back of the room said, could you do that again and try not to act so much? And I said, who's the asshole in the back? And I think it was Dan said, oh, he's the writer. And I was like, yeah, well, fuck him. And so I read it again. Dan's like, calm down a little bit, read the scene again. I read it again, totally screwed it up, and said, look, I'm sorry, fuck it, I'm really sorry. And I left. And they called me back, and when I finally got the part, I asked Bill, why the hell, I called you an asshole, I didn't know who you were, and I walked out on the audition because I sucked. And he said, you became Michael at that moment. That's just what Michael would have done. So, I got my first part because I screwed it up, but, I say this, you're only allowed to do that once.
And Steve came on stage with the partner. His partner was Mark at the time. And for about 15 minutes, they were doing a dog routine, never saying a word throughout the whole thing. And Bill looked at me and said, I think he's a good actor. And I said, okay, let's offer him the part. So we walked up to Steve after the show, and we said, would you have coffee with us? And we told him about the film, and we told him we wanted to offer him the part. And he didn't even hesitate for a moment. It was really remarkable. And I tried to say something about it being a gay role, and he didn't really care, not at all. And I was quite astonished, because there were actors that wouldn't take roles in this film, and we had a number of them that the agents told them not to, or friends told them not to, or whatever. And with Steve, there was nothing like that.
Bill Sherwood and I were secretaries together at WCBS TV, which I doubt even to this day they've recovered from us, because we were the epicenter of the world. In particular, Bill. I can't even take credit, but we were laughing today because we were the secretaries for the heads of finance and business for WCBS TV, and the phone would ring and you were supposed to say, WCBS TV, Renee Isley's office, or whoever, and the phone would ring and Bill would simply pick it up and just hang it up. And Cindy and I would be like, Bill, you have to answer the phone, and he would say to me, Kathy, I'm working on the movie. WCBS TV, blah, 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 and that was it, and that's where he wrote that movie while we were working at WCBS TV, and I don't know what happened to those people, but, the world was ours.
We were doing this bare bones production of Kid Champion, and Bill came in to see it, and there were like 12 guys from Circle in the Square with us. So a lot of people auditioned, and he called all of us in. And I got a call back, and I go in to read, and it's, him.
I'm auditioning you.
And it was actually great, because we had just spent, a year. Richard was there for 2 years. I was there for a year and a half at Circle in the Square with the same sort of wonderful, wacky teachers. And so we did have a fairly common language for approaching, working, and reading, and that made it great. I mean, it sort of took a lot of the edge off of, auditioning for me anyway at the time. But when I got a call from Bill, and help me if I remember this correctly, we had a talk at a coffee shop on Broadway in the 70s, 84th. And he said, so do you want to be in the movie? And I had already read the script, which was quite wonderful, and I said, yeah. He goes, well, you sure you don't want to think about this? And I said, well, what's to think about? Employment or, non-employment? And he said, well, spoke to a lot of people who have had a problem about being in the film because of the subject matter and being gay and typecast. And I said, well, it was okay. I said, I'd much rather work than not work. And I thought it was a terrific script. And I remember the first thing that I shot was that little sort of in the montage in the very beginning of the film, with the first thing on camera that I was part of with Richard was where they rolled back the shower curtain and the two of us are in the shower together. And
the water was ice cold.
We shot almost everything except the exterior scenes in Bill's apartment on the Upper West Side, and it was sort of like being in a Stop and Shop with things moving and changing, and there were quite a few people in the bathroom when we shot that. At one point I said, "They selling tickets? This is very crowded here," because right on the floor next to the tub there were quite a few people seated. And Bill had this wonderful way of, he was a musician and he was an editor and he was a very he had great feeling, but he was never really accustomed to speaking to actors or attempting to explain what he wanted in any reasonable way. You would just get the impression that he was really pissed off. That they're asking questions, not good. And so I finally said to him, kind of crowded in here. And he goes, I'll explain later. Okay, so the next day he finally said, they just we needed to see if you could be convincing. And we figured the shower was a good place to watch.
We maybe had already started shooting when you came.
Yeah.
I just came across the backstage ad where we advertised for the part of Robert, and the date is September 21st, and I think we had started shooting earlier that month.
You've done some exterior stuff, I think.
So it all worked out perfect.
The whole film cost $320,000, including the blow-up that we did. And that after we shot most of the film, at some point we ran out of money, and we had to stop for about 5 months. And I think that was the most difficult time for all of us, because we thought we may never be able to finish a film. And at that time, Bill asked me to go out and get money whichever way I could. And I ended up getting my father to buy the Moviola flatbed that was at Bill's place, and faking it as an investment in the film and things like that. And also, I think it was the only time in my life, and 20 odd years later I can say that I actually slept with people hoping to get money out of it.
And the thing is, Bill expected that from his
And we came to see the poster, and there was only one problem with it, and that was that the pink triangles were upside down. They didn't even know how to do that right. And I remember Bill really screaming, and his voice would get really high, it would shriek. And they were so scared. They were really scared, and they promised that they'd fix it the same day, even though they'd already printed a lot of those posters.
United States.